Okay. Um, how exciting this is. We have been waiting for this for weeks now. So thank you very much for joining us today to give this talk. My name is Laura Lawson, and I am the Interim Executive Dean for the School of Environmental and Biological Sciences and the Experiment Station. Letting you know that the Zoom will be recorded, and it's going to be on our YouTube station, the SEBS YouTube station, so we can watch it at our leisure later. There are over 130 people that are registered for this conversation, and exciting for me is over 60 of them are students. So and we're really reaching the future innovators, and so we're very happy about that. And we're excited that you're here to talk with us today, because here at the School of Environmental and Biological Sciences and with the Agricultural Experiment Station, we really want to encourage, and we have a history of encouraging innovation and collaboration with the university and out in our communities in New Jersey. And so a little inspiration from you can go a long way to kind of carrying on that message. Here in New Jersey and nationally, we're known for our innovations in, for example, turf grass and dogwoods, all sorts of other crops, cranberries, blueberries, and other things that really we see every day. And maybe there's a connection with the blueberries and cranberries that we should talk about going forward. So here briefly to talk about more innovation that occurs at Rutgers is Prabhas Modi, who is the Executive Vice President for Academic Affairs, and also has oversight over the Office of Innovation or Research and Innovation. So there is no one else like Prabhas for advocating for innovation at Rutgers, and so I'm delighted to introduce him.
Thank you, Laura, and welcome, Ben, to Rutgers and this fraternity and sorority of innovators and wannabe entrepreneurs. I want to thank Ron and Lori and Melissa, Nolan, all of the group for making this happen. And I might take this opportunity as the Chief Academic Officer for Rutgers to sort of take on this immensely enormous, that's Rutgers University, and just sort of think about what does it take for a university like ours to become more innovative in our thinking. And as Laura's saying, we all know this, there has been a tremendous amount of intellectual property at the university, dating back all the way to our antibiotics, our therapeutics, our work in turf grass, tomatoes, in telecom, wireless, and as well as in materials, in green concrete. So there has been this huge amount of disruptive work at Rutgers. And the one area that I feel doesn't particularly get noticed as much is the fact that there's so much research going on as well. So at Rutgers, Laura, as you know, there's over $700 million of research done through funding from the federal agencies and the state agencies, and through philanthropy and private agencies as well. This is more research in dollars than all other universities in New Jersey put together, including Princeton. The question is, how can we use this research to put our innovations toward more impact in terms of products, services, and partnerships, in terms of generating value for the communities, the state, and beyond. But let me just give you some numbers, especially for the students that are among us. In the past year, nearly 150 global patents were issued to Rutgers. These are issued, this is not filing. Over $15 million in licensing revenue, nearly 200 invention disclosures were filed. And if you kind of look at our numbers, Rutgers and Princeton in comparison, as two research leading universities in the region, both universities in the top 75 in the Reuters top 100 innovative universities, top 100, were around 75. Rutgers numbers are total patents filed 236, success rate 43%, and commercial impact score, which is sort of what happens when an idea in Ben's head gets converted into a company. That's the commercial success score, is about 27.6%. Princeton numbers are 164 patents filed, success rate about the same, slightly lower, 42%, and commercial impact score, about the same, slightly lower, 25%. So we've had about 86 active startups from Rutgers come out. And you may have heard, we're living through the singular moment in our planet, the pandemic. Just during the pandemic, you may have heard about Rutgers having spun out one of its companies, Infinity Biologics now. The saliva PCR testing that came out of Infinite Biologics was very much talked about. And that's just one example. The Food Innovation Center, its initiation of this extremely sought after product, the Impossible Burger, as another example. Now, for the students on the call, one of my dream projects is to take on what you are doing in entrepreneurship. And there are many, many hotspots of entrepreneurship at the campus. But the one thing we need to figure out how to do better is how to scale them, how to connect them, how to build this circuitry of research and innovation. I think if we did that, you could imagine us leapfrogging further. So Ben, any ideas, any engagement from people like you would be highly inspirational. I'm giving you one teaser of it. If you were to kind of Google IDEA, IDEA, Innovation, Design, Entrepreneurship Academy. This was one pilot project that we've launched in New Brunswick. It'll take the first cohort of students, especially the students that have a hunger in their belly. They may not be the students with the 4.0 GPAs. They could be them, but they are particularly interested in going after a disruptive idea, a grand challenge. We want to take this cohort and lead them through 4 years of this exposure to the Ben Weisses of the world, to the research labs, to the entrepreneurship ecosystem, and then see what happens. It's an experiment, and I hope you wish me luck, and I hope that all of you can be a part of these kinds of experiments at Rutgers. There are other programs like the NSF I-Core program, the Entrepreneurial Society. There's work that Lori does through the entire entrepreneurial ecosystem. I think all of these are expressions of interest bubbling up. Somehow we've got to capture this and scale it up. So that's essentially my homework to do. But I want to be here, Ben, to welcome you on behalf of Rutgers and hopefully convey to you there's a lot of excitement here and there's a lot of interest in hearing from people that are as impressive as you and your work. So thank you, Laura, for inviting me. I hope to hear from Ben, and I certainly hope to acquire a copy of his book. And I am absolutely interested in converting my cocktail bar area of my basement into an invention studio and see where it takes me. Thank you all, and stay tuned.
Great idea. I love that idea. So thank you very much, Dr. Modi. And now this afternoon's conversation is thanks to the Institute for Food, Nutrition, and Health's external advisor, board chair, Ron Levine. Ron will be one of the afternoon's moderators. He is general counsel for the Herrick Feinstein Law Firm and is adjunct professor for the Masters of Business and Science program. The second moderator will be Nolan Lewin, who is at our Rutgers Food Innovation Center, acting executive director and director of operations. Nolan was the plant manager who scaled up the production of Bai brand via L'Industrie Food and Drink. He also owned his own retail markets, restaurants, catering facilities, and cheese operations over the past 30 years. And he's a delight to talk with about all of those things. So with that, I turn this over to Ron and Nolan. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. And thanks to everyone for joining us. We're delighted to introduce today's guest, beverage entrepreneur Ben Weiss, who has recently released his new book, Basementality. If you've not already read his terrific book, hopefully you will take advantage of the Amazon discount Ben was kind enough to arrange, and it's on the screen with the discount code. The book discusses the mindset that empowered Ben to turn his vision into reality and achieve success in his career as an entrepreneur. In 2009, Ben founded Bai in the basement of his Princeton, New Jersey townhouse and quickly built it into the fastest growing brand in the industry. With Bai, Ben led what has been described as a bevolution against the established soft drink companies. His vision, which clearly took off, was to deliver a great tasting drink without heavy sugar and without artificial ingredients. The vision paid off for everyone involved in his bevolution. Dr. Pepper Snapple acquired Bai in 2017 for $1.7 billion. Now Ben is continuing his bevolution with a new company in the alcoholic beverage world. In 2018, Ben founded Crook and Marker, which is a line of organic alcoholic beverages with zero sugar and another terrific product. Now I'm going to turn over to Nolan, who's going to continue the conversation.
Thank you, Ron, and thank you, Dean Lawson and Dr. Pope. I'm thrilled to be here this afternoon, and it's a little bit strange for me to come full circle, having worked as plant manager for Ledestri and helping to scale up Ben's products. But I also have to tip my hat to Ben, because had I not spent those years working in the plant and really watching a true entrepreneur dedicated to the success of his own company, I'm truly impressed with the dedication and drive that he had. But we're excited to have Ben join us for his discussion on his book, Basementality, and talk about the challenges, pitfalls, thrills of life as an entrepreneur. This Zoom call is a conversation with Ben. Please start sending your questions via chat to the co-hosts, and we will be happy to try and help answer any questions that you have. Ben, can you please tell us about this slide?
Well, Nolan, thanks for the kind words, and Ron, thanks for the introduction, and Prabhas, thank you for the background on really what I spend a lot of time talking about, which is the difference between being an innovator and being an entrepreneur. Specifically, I spend a lot of time thinking and talking to people about what does it mean to be an entrepreneur, because I don't think anybody really has a profound definition of that. You know, I have this slide that I kind of put up there that defines the entrepreneurial journey. You know, it's the 70 to 75% of those ideas, those innovations, those patents, if you will, that don't find their way to market and take that journey successfully. That's where they go to die. And, for me, being an entrepreneur, whether it be, in the beverage space or anywhere else, it's about every day finding your edge. And for me, blowing up a big red balloon, and that balloon right there shows all of my past businesses, some of which have been highly successful, some of which have been failures, all of which has kind of shaped my journey and prepared me for my biggest success, which was Bai. And quite frankly, at that time, I was the right entrepreneur at the right time with the right amount of experience as a result of all those ideas that I innovated that are on that balloon. But really the point of the balloon and the point of holding the balloon and not tying a knot is that creating an idea is like blowing up that balloon. And really it's like everybody has experienced this at one point in their life. When you blow up a balloon, you always wonder, what is that last breath going to do? Is it going to pop the balloon? And when you think it's big enough, then you give it that one last breath and you hope it doesn't pop. But at that point, it's an audacious idea. And then you hold that balloon through your journey. You envision yourself every day holding this balloon. And the question is, what does that balloon look like at the end of that day, at the end of that journey? Because you as an entrepreneur, your job is to not let any air out of that balloon. And that's what keeps you from that graveyard. Now, listen, you got to have a great idea. You got to have a great sense of timing with that idea. I felt this way about every one of my businesses, some of which admittedly failed, but all of which I thought audaciously and I dreamt audaciously and I blew up that balloon. And every time, these balloons, these businesses, these ideas are meant to fail. I always say businesses come out of the womb or come out of the mind failing, just like a kid comes out, crying. It doesn't happen right out of the gate. The question is, how much of that idea gets marginalized by those who do not see what you see and are not willing to do what you do in order to disrupt an industry? And it's the entrepreneur's job to hold on tight. And at the end of the day, or at the end of that journey, to look at that balloon and see, okay, well, it still resembles my idea. Maybe some air got taken out of it, but you don't want that balloon to go limp, because that's kind of the destiny of all brands. And that going into it with that mindset gives you an edge, but it also defines what an entrepreneur is. An entrepreneur, their job is to take that innovation and to give it commercial success, to use your term. And as your studies show, not many get there. But for me, every day I check that balloon to see if I let the powers that be marginalize it. And you shepherd it there until you have enough momentum, enough like-minded people who are kind of seeing the same thing. And then, you get the momentum that hopefully carries you from that point forward.
We're getting some great questions. If I could just ask, how much do you test the success of Bai and Crook and Marker to the area of New Jersey where these products were created, Ben? And they're referring to Trenton Hamilton area with the claim that Trenton makes all.
You were breaking up a little bit, Nolan, but were you asking me about how I went about testing my innovation?
They're asking how the area that you created, that your creations come from, the Trenton Hamilton area, and how much of that contributes to the success.
How much of that is contributed to it? I mean, I don't think if I had started Bai anywhere, I don't know if it was because of Trenton. With all due respect to Trenton, I'm sitting in Trenton right now. A stone toss from what we call Bai quarters. Now we're at the House of Crook. So I clearly have an affinity for Trenton. I'm not suggesting it really mattered, to be honest with you. I think new young brands need to be humbled. If you looked out the window I'm looking out, you'll see train tracks. When the train comes by, you might hear it. If you were standing here, you'd feel it because the building shakes. And I think there's something about, being modest in your beginnings. Even on the other side of a big success like Bai, we kind of ran back to our roots. It keeps you humble. It keeps you hungry. But Trenton found us. It's not like I was looking for Trenton, but along the way, we've built a bit of a love affair.
That's great.
I had a question. Do you think that, Ben, do you think that large companies like Dr. Pepper, Snapple can be innovative, or do new products and innovations have to come from startups like yours?
Well, I could speak to the beverage space, and I think there's some truth to it, Ron, across other categories. I've been quoted before as saying, they don't have permission to innovate. The minute, something comes out of Plano or Atlanta or, Purchase, New York, the consumer doesn't want that. They leave, and you know what? They know it. And they leave the barriers to entry open so that people like me can innovate in a very authentic way out of my basement or out of somebody's garage. You see all the ones that kind of break through have started in a very modest way. But from that point, it's about how do you circumnavigate through a system where the very people you want to disrupt own the route to market. So they don't feel very threatened, right? So that's why they leave the barriers open, and that's why they let us do it, because I think they realize they don't have permission to. I don't remember the last piece of innovation that came out of one of the big three soda companies. And what they ultimately do is they'll buy the brand because they control its fate to a degree, because you got to get on their trucks. and then they'll euthanize the brand. You know, and the other thing is I don't know of many brands where they've allowed that brand to rise to the top. There's a reason why soda is still relevant in society, why the soda aisle still looks like it did 40 years ago when no graph should suggest that be the case. That's the advantage of owning your route to market. And because they're not threatened by innovation elsewhere, and because, quite frankly, I think we care more than they do about innovation. They care more about propping up legacy brands. So I think, you know, in the industry I find myself in, innovation is never done out of the big three soda companies.
And when I was with Ledestri and just before the sale of your business, I know there was some contentious times
You think? No.
with distribution and Dr. Pepper kind of flexing its arm.
Yeah.
And you just you know.
I actually thought you were going towards the contentious times between me and Ledestri, which there were many of those too. Listen, if you go on my Instagram account, there is a great post that we put up there yesterday that is given by a guy that you would love to interview, my head of VP Research and Development, who I can connect you guys, who basically said I'm the biggest pain in the ass he's ever met. And I am. I mean, if you ask the folks at Ledestri, and you'll appreciate it, Nolan. You might even know this. Every batch that you guys made of every flavor, we had a taste like a fine wine before we let you put it in a bottle. And they rolled their eyes to us initially, and then they challenged us by saying, okay, it's 2:30 in the morning, the batch is ready. And we'd have somebody down there by 3 a.m. in the morning just to, and as you know, Nolan, at that point, there's very little I can do to that batch if it's not right, except open up the spigot and let it go down the drain. But for us, it was important because, you know, to my point with Ron, we just care more. You think they're doing that in Atlanta, Georgia? They're just not, right? And, you know, that was my way of keeping everybody at Ledestri on guard that, you know, we're watching every move, man. We want to make sure that we were obsessed about the product. And, so there were contentious moments, which I thought you were alluding to, you know, with Ledestri. The journey is filled with contentious moments with the distributor. I mean, that's the fight. You know, I sum it up by saying, as an entrepreneur, I'm just tethered to a vision of the future that they're not, and I don't expect them to be. But a good entrepreneur, you know, is so tethered that you can't, good luck convincing me otherwise. And I would constantly be having mental warfare, whether you knew it or not, with my network to either get them to see what I see or to, quite frankly, get out of the way. And that's the journey that takes idea or innovation to commercial success. And that's the role of the entrepreneur, is that they've got to bring that fight. Because I don't remember the last, you know, idea that just rolled off the assembly line and was hugely successful, you know? You know, if you look at all the great entrepreneurs, you look at Elon Musk, I mean, Tesla's been losing money forever until it started making money. But until that, his stock was still going up because you saw his vision and you were buying into his vision. It just takes time for that vision to find its commercial success. We were able to do it with great discipline in the beverage space because it's very tempting to grow nationally and to get a little of a lot, you know, and go an inch deep and a mile wide in retail and in geographies, and brands will just kind of go away if that's the strategy. And we just dug really deep into these markets before we became national brand, and we created great brand loyalty in doing so with a product that was very much on trend and very well timed.
Ben, I think that a dream for any entrepreneur would be to get into a big box store like Walmart. I was really interested in the story in your book about your experience with Walmart. I thought you might, if you could share that with us.
Yeah, Ron, that was a defining moment for me as an entrepreneur in a space where I had never played. So, you know, at that point, you know, I've been in the beverage business in other capacities, not in the ready to drink bottled beverage distribution business. So I was probably 4 years into that. And Walmart comes calling and says, overnight, I'm going to make you a $100 million business. I love your brand. Come on in. And when, they call you in to come to Bentonville, you go to Bentonville. And I went there with my president at the time, Ken Kurtz, who's our CEO today, who is royalty in the beverage days. And he and I walk in, and the buyer comes in drinking. Actually, he was drinking what I'm drinking right now, a Malachi coconut, and he was skipping in, and I pick up on everything. This guy's bottle was maybe a third full. He was drinking it. It wasn't for show. Tells me his wife or his fiance at the time loves the brand, knew everything about it. I'm thinking, I looked at Ken, this is a layup. We just, hit it out of the park. And he says, I'm going to make you $100 million business, but we're going to go through my distribution, and I want to make you a 10 for 10, which is $1 a bottle, which is when a brand goes 10 for 10 in the beverage space, it's no longer a premium brand. And I couldn't even make a product like Bai for 10 for 10. So I told the buyer that no, we wouldn't do it. We're committed to DSD, which is direct store distribution. We have a network of distributors. And quite frankly, there's no reason this brand should be $1 a bottle. I couldn't even get there. So we kind of left without a deal. And on the way out, Ken kind of put his arm around me and says, I'm so proud of you as a young founder in this industry to say no to Walmart because they were not putting us in a position to be successful. But then he said the magic words, which kind of defined our journey, which is, don't worry, we'll get Target. And when he said, don't worry, we'll get Target, he was right. We got Target. They charged $1.99 for the brand. Their enhanced water category was dying on the vine. They allowed us to innovate. They allowed us to disrupt their stores. They became our incubator. They became our retail partner. And then Walmart became our biggest customer ever at $1.98. So, it's about when I say ushering, you got to see through certain things and know when you're putting your brand in compromised positions, in positions where it can't be successful. It's the worst thing you can do for a brand, because at that point, not only does the brand not perform in those retail outlets, but you tend to overcompensate for the brand, and you tend to devote too many resources and attention to fixing something that is broken and will never work because that retailer didn't see what I saw. And they gave me this much opportunity to disrupt the store where I need this much opportunity. And it has just a snowball effect, and you invariably make some of those mistakes. I just think we made fewer of them. And that's probably around the best example of the discipline that it requires to build distribution equity and let the brand find its way on shelf in a meaningful way with the retailers that are going to lean in with the brand, even if it's not the biggest national retail in the world. Go play with the hyper regionals and have great success with them because they'll tend to lean in a little bit more.
And in line with your history of innovation with coffee drinks and other products, one of the questions we have is what your perspective and insight are into the growth of wellness brands that intersect with beverage products. Is there potential with changing consumer behavior for adoption of those products today?
So the consumers are there already. You don't have to beat the consumer. So if you're in an industry where you have to educate the consumer, you might be in the wrong industry because they might never get it. You got to find where those consumers are, those trendsetters, and then you got to speak to them. The person who's okay drinking diet soda, will never drink Bai. It's just they're happy drinking diet soda. There was a category called the soda indulgers. They're just people who like to indulge in soda. They don't need a solution to that. So I think it's important to find your early adopters and to kind of make noise alongside them and grow alongside them. But the movements are usually already happening. You're just trying to catch that wave. I'll give you a great example. Now, I could have easily gotten into the hard seltzer movement, right, with Crooked Marker, because by the time I I knew it was coming because my consumer over at Bai was suggesting that they're now taking their drinking habits towards alcohol because they all, in 2016, they all became of legal drinking age, the millennial demographic. So I knew this was coming. So in that regard, maybe I was spotting a trend. But it would have been very easy for me to just kind of create a carbonated drink and call it a seltzer and just sell alongside this rush. But I always say here at Crook, we're not that company. We're trying to get over the hard seltzer wave before it crashes. And I'm more interested on what's beyond seltzer. And I know that typically what happens with consumers is they get bored and frustrated with seltzer. They go there in droves because they don't want to drink something else, whether it be soda on the non-alc side or beer on the outside. They're finding another solution, but they leave seltzer. And I kind of created this because of my experience to say, what's beyond that? So in a way, Nolan, I am saying that, sometimes you go find those innovations. They're there. I know they're there. They're the ones that are reluctantly drinking seltzer. They're just waiting for big, bold flavor that they can trust. And this year, and it usually takes 2 or 3 years. And that's why I say most good brands that are well-timed, right? Well-timed doesn't mean you come out of the gate, because you can never come out of the gate and capture everything. You're too young. You don't have the resources. You don't have the ability to do it. You're actually poorly timed if you're getting in as it's happening. So if I got into hard seltzer as it's happening, I'm just going to get swallowed up by the seltzer wave when it crashes. So, well-timed means you're 2 or 3 years out. So how do you take this innovation and say, okay, I got 2 or 3 years of losing money, of trying to figure out what I've done right and wrong, of dealing with people who just don't see what I see because I'm 2 or 3 years too early. And that's where, a lot of brands go to die, right? So timing is everything. But as an entrepreneur, you got to kind of have this intuition as to, I want to get to a brand as it's on the shoulder, right? Not when it's on the top. And I think we've nailed that with Crook & Marker. But we're, 2 years into that process that would have killed most other brands. Because you lose money too during that time.
Ben, could you tell us something about raising money? Are people entrepreneurs, are they investing in the product, investing in the person, both?
Listen, Ron, I can tell you from experience before now, on the other side of Bai, I clearly get solicited a lot of ideas, right? So as an entrepreneur, not as an investor, I would have told you that, especially with Bai, that A, you got to have a great product, but B, it's all about the jockey. Like, I see good products now, and it's almost like I want to develop an entrepreneurial aptitude test where I could just say, okay, just take this test, take this gauntlet, let me see if you have what it takes to survive the 2 years that nobody gives a damn about your product, right? And when I hear people enthusiastically talking about their product, I worry that they're too narrowly focused on their product. Because at the end of the day, there's a graveyard of good products. I'll determine for myself whether I think your product is good. If it's a beverage, I'll drink it, I'll read it, I'll envision it, I'll go through my 2 or 3 things to see if it's got a potential. But let's say it did. The question now is that I look at you, Ron, I say, Ron, do you have the aptitude to take that thing nationally? And it's so funny because, I talk about with Crook. So here it is with Crook & Marker. I'm an entrepreneur again, right? Listen, at the end of the day, I still have to go through the process of having a consumer fall in love with my brand. You can't fast track that, right? So I was just talking to my 300 distributors the other day on a Zoom call, and I said, you know what? It took me 771 days to get the product formulated, to get the product sourced, the packaging, the ingredients, to build a network of distributors. It took me 771 days, and all it did was put me on the starting line. And now I'm on the starting line, and it's been 592 days, because it was 3 days ago, that I've been, this brand has been exposed to distributors and retailers and consumers. And often the consumer is the last to find it because I got to get through the distributor and the retailer who don't see what I see, so it doesn't get to the shelf. So really, I'm now 1,200 and something days into this, and I've got less than 1% market, penetration. And I've got great brand loyalists. They found me, but I'm a pimple, on the face of the beverage industry right now. And you've got to be able to sustain that. That's, if my math's right, let's call it 3-4 years, right? And then the next 2 years is going to be the grind of building distribution. And now I'm 6 years into this, right? If you don't love every bit of that 6-year journey, don't do it, Ron, don't do it. Because that's, the prize is the journey. It's having this dream in your head that nobody else shared. At some point, it was just in my head, to making it tangible, right? That's the innovation part, make it taste good, look good, to then getting people to see the vision you see. And now you've got a few like-minded people on your team that are now tethered to the same vision. And now you got a team, and then maybe you tip a regional, a store, it starts with a store, maybe you tip a regional chain, and all of a sudden, you got to take note of all those wins. I call them moments as an entrepreneur. You have a moment. You're like, well, that's pretty cool. This guy's now like on my team, and good luck trying to convince him that, that this isn't the future in refreshment and alcohol. And she's on my team. And now, and by the way, there's not that many people that can do this. You might have a few that you're kind of, but that's momentum. And that momentum behind a really good brand allows you to have enough moments of success to keep you going. Now you're going to spend a lot of money along the way. You could have, you're not making a salary most of that time, right? If you're an entrepreneur, you're forfeiting a salary. So there's a lot of sacrifice. So when I was listening to Prabhas talk about innovation versus entrepreneurship and commercial success rate, the way innovation becomes a commercial success is you get people like me to say, I'm going to put this thing on my back and see where it goes. And they got to be tethered to that because it comes out failing. And you got to go find the calm waters. And maybe I'm sadistic in a way. I love the journey. I love the frustration. I love all of the challenges that are in front of bringing an idea to life. And I don't fear failing, Ron. So I'm a realist. I know that I can't win on every one of these journeys.
And thank you. I'm just curious about your thoughts about starting another venture now, since you started one during the recession. Your kind of forte to have those, I think we talked about bifocals and your vision.
Yeah.
Is now a good time for you to start thinking about that?
I never really take note of it, but obviously, I started Bai in 2009. That was a bad time I would imagine it was a bad time for the economy. I mean, it was quite frankly, it was easy to raise money, ironically. And something about beverage, it just becomes an affordable luxury in a bad environment. I don't want to say it's recession proof, but I mean, kind of is. This time around, I started in a pandemic, and who would have thought that? And it actually, in a way, because some badass visionaries from the Prohibition days figured out a way to make the post-Prohibition days, figured out a way to make beer an essential, a life essential, which I'm blown away by. We were actually selling throughout the whole pandemic. Not to say that pandemic didn't cause some major challenges for us, but it didn't completely shut down our business. It actually, we were okay. But that you see in hindsight. I didn't see that coming, and I wouldn't have told you if I saw it coming that we would have been able to survive it. But again, we're tethered, and we had a path to getting through it, and it worked.
And just as a follow-up on that answer, real briefly, for students, what advice do you have about the beginnings of an innovative endeavor like yours?
it's funny because now I do a lot of follow-ups to these types of calls. We call them Basementality sessions, and I offer it to the group here as well. And Eric Quinones can follow up on that. But I had a recent conversation with some MBA students about this yesterday. It was a novel idea in the beverage space. I didn't think it was a very disruptive idea, but that doesn't mean it couldn't find its place in the industry. But they were so focused on the novelty of the idea that I don't think they gave any thought to, sorry, did I lose you or are you still there now?
Sure.
To the 6-year journey that I just shared with you. And, I have to, I feel like it's one of my responsibilities as an entrepreneur is to enlighten them to that. You gotta be tethered to the idea. That idea has to have a beginning, a middle, and end. Otherwise, you're not tethered to it. Because to be tethered to it, there's a line connecting you, and that's the journey. Now, listen, it doesn't, 8, 9 years later, that line can look very different, but you got to have the discipline of saying, if I do this, it's going to cost me Y. As a result, I can get to this much in sales. And I see other companies getting, valuations of Z, and that means I could exit at this. And these are the 5 people that I'll disrupt along the way, and maybe why they would want to acquire the brand. And every time I have to raise along the way, it's a dilution event, and people get excited about raising money at high valuations. But the reality is I hated raising money because every time I did, that means me and my investors get diluted. So, just kind of, it's the unsexy part of dreaming, right? That could eventually turn into a nightmare if you don't think it through today, have a plan. I do feel the entrepreneur gods kind of bless you when you have a plan. It could be the wrong plan, but you have a plan. And Nolan, you'd be shocked at how few people have a plan. They get caught up on the innovation and they don't have a plan.
You should come by our innovation center then. We'll let you do a few more.
Well, that's why I say it was the right entrepreneur. I've been that guy at times, right? I've been doing this my whole life. So I've only known entrepreneurship. And then that red balloon had all my businesses on it. The book kind of goes through a lot of them. But, I was the right guy at the right time that I've developed this mindset. I had a plan. I thought Bai would be the evolution of vitamin water, antioxidants would be the evolution of vitamins, and that there would be a path to a $3.5 billion. That's not how my plan worked out, but I did okay in failing because at least I had a plan, and it was an audacious plan.
Are you ever concerned about somebody stealing one of your ideas? I mean, when you started off with coffee fruit, did you think someone was going to jump in and try to take that away from you?
Because it's not about the idea, Ron. Like I said, there's a graveyard of good ideas. I can out execute anybody in the field, and I'm confident there. Like, no one's going to out care me. No one's going to out execute me. I always said that the next buy is in someone else's basement because it wasn't a patentable idea. And one day there'll be a 5-calorie drink that tasted as good. But none of them are going to care as much as me. And I had a good head start. But I used that to create the pace at which we ran. And it was at times. But I also, like was stated earlier, I mean, we were chasing something bigger than a drink. I was chasing a devolution. Like, I wanted to take sugar off the streets. I wanted to become Coca-Cola. I wanted to make every red truck a white truck with Bai on it. Like that, there aren't many entrepreneurs in the beverage space thinking that way. A lot of them are probably thinking, I would love to sell this one day to a beverage company. Now, listen, like I said, I had a plan, and that plan did say, all right, I think a beverage company would pay 3.5 because I do think you need an exit strategy. But even after we sold, my plan was to then buy them. I wasn't done. Unfortunately, that didn't happen.
So Ben, what in your mind makes a successful entrepreneur, and how can universities help support entrepreneurs in general better through funding, mentorship, whatever you think?
So I think I've been kind of clear, Nolan, with what makes a successful entrepreneur. It's really just trusting your vision, having a plan for that piece of innovation, and at that point, it's about sacrifice. I mean, you got to be willing to sacrifice a lot early on, knowing that you're just going to deal with failure, and you got to find, an entrepreneur has to find the moments of success in all that failure in order to build upon those successful moments. And that just takes you got to have a fortitude about you where you just, you're not afraid to fail. You're not afraid to put your brand out there, and you do it in a way where the brand is not going to be marginalized, right? Because there's this gravitational pull to marginalize your brand. So that's the mindset, and that's what we call a Basementality mindset, which is kind of like why I wrote the book. I don't know what universities can do to foster this. I will tell you, we speak to a lot of them. And that's only been happening over the last 6 months or so. I do know this. I think there's an opportunity to really define entrepreneurism right now. I don't know. Right now, all the entrepreneurs that are kind of touted are also vilified for being multi-billionaires and almost untouchable at this point. What I like about my interactions with students in just kind of expressing my entrepreneurial journey is that it's attainable. I mean, with all due respect, I didn't go to school for an MBA to do what I'm doing, right? I didn't spend all that time in an innovation lab or getting patents. I just went out there, and in my industry, it's a beautiful industry that, with all its faults, it allows you to do what I'm doing. And, if you have a good product, you can out execute behemoths. And if you do that long enough in a strategic way, you can make a difference, because it is a very broken industry. But relative to a curriculum, or I don't know, but I think that is the big question right now, because I think it's fairly undefined. Yet on the other side of COVID, where all these small businesses are taking, such big steps back and being shuttered, I think those people are going to redefine themselves as entrepreneurs, because they are entrepreneurs, right? So I think you're going to have this renewed enthusiasm for entrepreneurship, and I think it begs for a better definition, because it's too broadly defined with just being in business. And I think and I think that's what the book kind of attempts to do, is to say this is kind of the mentality of what you're going to go through and how you have to approach it. I don't know. It'll be interesting. I think it's going to be an exciting time to be an entrepreneur.
Ben, could you tell us something about what's going on in the alcoholic beverage world, which I take it is somewhat different than the Bai world?
It's the wild, wild west. It is it's a free-for-all. Listen, it is very different, plagued by the same problem, which is you have route to markets. Yes, there's a 3-tier system in the alcohol side that doesn't exist on the non-alc side. So your distributor and your supplier can be the same person in non-alc, right? So Coke makes a product, owns products, and distributes it. Here you can't do that, but they still have too much authority on propping up legacy brands. And/or innovation. This is the big difference, Ron. You asked about innovation out of the non-alc side, which I said they don't have permission. Innovation on the outside is only beer companies. So when I look at where we are as a company, Crooked Marker, I'm surrounded by behemoths innovating outside of beer, like Boston Beer now has Truly. I mean, actually, Boston Beer should change their name, because I don't even think I think they sell more what you call FMBs than they do beer. So they have Truly and Twisted Tea, and Mark Anthony has Mike's Hard and White Claw, and these are big companies, and Anheuser-Busch has, Bud Light Seltzer and Bon and Vive, and they have a third one, I forget off the top of my head, Constellation is corrupt. They all have their versions of beer now in seltzer. That is very different. And that is, for me, the opportunity, because Crook and Marker is the only player in that space that every day we wake up, our fight is not tethered to beer. Like, I don't have, 50% of my portfolio as part of my problem. I focus just on the future and just on where the consumer is going. And I think that's very exciting for me, even though along the way, I am dealing with a lot of frustrating situations that, are still propping up legacy brands. So there's a lot of change going on. I don't think beer will ever be what it was, and I think the consumer's looking for a new way to refresh in alcohol, which is basically a low ABV alcohol. And that's what we look to do as a company. So what we're trying to do with Crook and Marker is we want to be the premium end of the low ABV section. And we do it through an organic super grain alcohol that's USDA organic, alcohol fermented by ancient grains, quinoa, amaranth, millet, and cassava root. And then obviously, like we did at Bai, we do it with zero sugar and infinite flavor. So I think we're really well positioned in alcohol to speak to that consumer as they go beyond seltzer.
And going back to the beginnings of Bai, can you briefly tell us some of the steps that you took to build that successful initial base and that initial scaling up?
Yeah. So initially, it was me and my dad selling out of a car and opening up a folding table outside of independent stores, literally, and then watching people sample our product. And through that year zero, I call it, where nobody cares and nobody's really looking at us, you pivot. And I saw things like, wow, how much sugar is in this? And at that time, we were a mid-calorie drink. And, what is this? I don't want to taste it. I never had it before. But when I call it an antioxidant infusion, they're like, oh, I trust antioxidants. And they start drinking it. So, those are two pivots that come to mind where I increased the antioxidant story. I kind of buried the coffee fruit story because as I told them about the coffee fruit story, they're like, I don't know, coffee and fruit. What does it taste like? I don't drink coffee. Does it have caffeine? So that was confusing them. And I had 10 seconds to get these people to decide to drink Bai as opposed to whatever else. So, I'm able to, and then I made a 5-calorie drink from a mid-calorie drink. Those are big pivots that, early on in year zero, you do. And then it allowed me to go to, which was in hindsight, one of the best decisions we made, go to Costco and sample it to the masses. So we did these roadshows, 4-day roadshows, and they're grueling, but you get a chance to get into 10 to 15,000 mouths and sell the product right there. And I knew that was the path. I just knew that we had to get our product into people's mouths and they'd buy it. So that was a big part of our successes. We almost inverted the model. We went to club first and we launched it in Costco. Typically you go to club last. And that strategy really worked because it was paid for marketing. We sold a ton of product in club, and then grocery stares at club and they're like, oh, what's this brand? And then they wanted us. So now we were kind of going to grocery without slotting fees. And the most expensive channel, which you would typically incubate a new brand in, which is convenience, which is, slotting fees and expensive. We didn't do any of that. So we saved all that money unknowingly by not focusing on that channel. And that was probably the biggest, early on moves that determined the fate of the brand.
And just as a follow-up too, Ben, most people in the food industry never get to go into Costco's and BJ's before they've done a proof of concept. So what you did was very bold, was very innovative.
Oh, and they do if you are willing to do it on consignment and stand behind a table for 12 hours a day, 4 days a week, and wear a hairnet. The problem is nobody wants to do that. What they don't get a chance to do is go in line. They're not going to put you like for sale in line, you know, and most people would say, I want to be in line. If I'm not in line, I'm not wearing a hairnet and doing that. We embraced that. And that, no, at a certain point, we had 20 of these roadshows going on in one weekend. I mean, we had teams everywhere. It cost us a lot of money, $10,000 a roadshow. And the goal was to break even or make a couple of bucks. But by the end of them, we were going to get in line. And that's the win, is when you ultimately get your brand on a pallet in one of the aisles.
I want to thank everyone. I think, Nolan, you're going to wrap up. So thank you, Ben. This has been fantastic. Nolan?
You're welcome, man.
Well, thank you. It's been a fascinating conversation. I want to thank all the participants and especially Ben for sharing his wisdom. One program that may be of interest for our Rutgers community is I-Corp. I-Corp is funded by the National Science Foundation with the goal of nurturing and supporting local teams to help transition their technology concepts into the marketplace. Exactly what we've been discussing today. So Rutgers students, faculty, and staff on all campuses are eligible to apply to the Rutgers I-Corp cohorts. For details, there'll be information on the chat, but it's icorps.rutgers.edu. We look forward to seeing your applications. And Ben, I want to thank you again for all the help you gave me personally, and for all the people that you're helping through your inspiration and your book. And it's a great read. It's very insightful. So thank you again.
Thank you, Nolan.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ben.
Okay, thank you, guys.
Thank
Thanks so
you.
much.
The video will be on the SEBS YouTube channel, the recording.